Ayato was a ridiculously overpowered knight who pretended to be weak just so he could loiter around the girls' bathroom. But everything changes the moment he accidentally wrecks the most popular girl in school in a duel. From that point on, everybody wants a piece of his sword skills. On his first day at the academy, Ayato was casually strolling to class when a handkerchief dropped right on his face. Realizing it had come from an open window, he jumped up to return it, and when he got there, he saw a half-naked girl named Julis, who screamed bloody murder at the sight of him. He tried to explain himself real quick, but Julis just told him to turn around while she got dressed. When she was done, she was super grateful that he'd returned the handkerchief, saying it meant a lot to her. But the very next second, Julis started charging up her powers, and Ayato, wisely, bailed out the window right as she turned into an enraged, fire-wielding demon. That didn't stop Julis's fury from chasing him down, though, and she publicly challenged him to a duel, demanding he restore her honor. Ayato tried every excuse in the book to weasel his way out of it, but some random guy in the crowd threw a modified lightsaber at him, basically forcing him into the fight. The rules were simple: whoever smashed the other's badge first would win. So the Fire Princess wasted no time and hit Ayato with her flaming spears. He dodged every single one with ease. Julis then cranked up her attack speed, hoping to catch him off guard, and it actually worked for a few seconds, until he got his footing back and countered. Watching all this, the students were shook, whispering that maybe Ayato would actually survive episode 1, which only made Julis even angrier. She tried to humiliate him with a giant fireball, but instead of running away like a coward, Ayato charged straight at her and sliced through it with the finesse of an anime protagonist who definitely trains off-screen. As he closed in, he pushed her to the ground, saving her from a mystery arrow that had been fired from the crowd. But instead of a thank you, the ungrateful princess started complaining. Ayato was about to call her out for it when they both realized at the same time that he'd been using one of her, let's say, assets as a hand pillow. Julis screamed in embarrassment and tried to burn him to a crisp. That's when Claudia, the student council president, showed up right on time and stopped Ayato from getting permanently relocated to another dimension, leaving Julis grinding her teeth in rage. Claudia explained that the duel was null and void because Ayato hadn't officially finished the transfer process yet, which left the princess absolutely fuming. After that, Claudia brought Ayato to her office and formally welcomed him to the academy. She also explained that, as a scholarship transfer student, he only had one job: win at the Phoenix Festa, which was basically the Olympics, except for people who could shoot fireballs and throw down like they were auditioning for the Avengers. Unfortunately, their academy was the tournament's wild card, but Claudia was hoping Ayato could be the secret weapon they needed. In exchange, he'd get anything he wanted, and hearing that, Ayato said he didn't really have any big wishes. Claudia was floored, a loser with zero ambition, and asked why he'd even bothered enrolling. He told her he was looking for his sister, who'd gone missing a long time ago, since he knew she'd also attended the school. After digging through the database, Claudia found out Haruka had withdrawn from the academy 6 months after enrolling, for personal reasons. There was no record of her competing in any festa or joining any school activities, which made Claudia wonder if Haruka had even really been a student there at all. Still, she suggested they look into the combat data from the Orgulux weapon Haruka had used back then, called the Silver Chariot Rondabellum. Torsair Veresta, a weapon so absurdly powerful it was basically unusable. But when Claudia checked, she found the data was corrupted. She then explained that every student got to pick one Lux weapon, and Ayato asked if he could use the Silver Chariot. Sorry, the Serveresta. Claudia said she needed to sort that out first and handed him a random weapon in the meantime. Then, out of nowhere, she hugged him from behind and said she was so happy they'd finally found each other, leaving the poor guy completely confused. Later that same day, he got introduced to the class by his teacher, who was giving him full problem child energy, and to make it worse, got seated right next to Julis, who still wanted his head on a platter. After class, he tried to smooth things over, asking if they could start fresh as friends, and she said she'd rather marry a pig. After she stormed off, a guy named Yabuki told Ayato not to take Julis's bad mood personally, since she basically hated everyone and everything. Yabuki also mentioned that Julis was the crown princess of her kingdom and hadn't lost a single duel since enrolling, which was exactly why she was currently sitting at number 5 in the school's overall rankings. As they were walking outside, Ayato suddenly handed Yabuki the weapon that had been thrown at him during the duel, saying he was grateful. Surprised, Yabuki asked how Ayato even knew it had been him who threw it, and Ayato said casually that he recognized his voice. Before Yabuki could ask if he was secretly some kind of vampire with super hearing, Julis's loud voice cut through the conversation. She was arguing with a guy named Lester, who was ranked 9th. Lester was trying to drag her into another duel, but she had zero interest, since she'd already beaten him 3 times in a row. When she tried to walk away, Lester lost it, grabbed her arm hard, and knocked her precious handkerchief to the ground. Almost instantly, Julis hit rage levels comparable to a certain angry firebending princess from a certain beloved cartoon. Ayato stepped in immediately, and when Lester realized who he was, he tried to pick a fight with him too. But once Yabuki whipped out his phone to start filming, Lester's buddy talked him down, and the tough guy backed off right away. Before leaving, he swore to Julis that he'd make her acknowledge his talent. Julis just watched him go without saying a word, then turned to Ayato, asking if he had some kind of hero complex. She warned him it was better for him to mind his own business, because at an academy like this, it wasn't hard to rack up enemies. Curious, Ayato asked why royalty like her was even at a regular academy, and she admitted, flat out, that it was for the money. Apparently she needed a serious cash boost, and her first big payday was riding on the Phoenix Festa. Hearing that, Yabuki asked if she already had a partner, since the Festa was a doubles event, and she admitted she didn't. But she made it very clear that had nothing to do with her being unlikable, and everything to do with the fact that she just hadn't found the right partner yet. When they asked what qualities that ideal partner needed, the girl launched into this whole knight in shining armor description, and the guys were left speechless. Right then, Yabuki got a call and dashed off, leaving Ayato alone to ask Julis for directions to the boys' dorm. She thought it was hilarious that he hadn't even checked a map, and laughed so hard she nearly cried. Seeing Julis actually let loose like that made Ayato compliment her, which left the fake tough girl totally flustered. She pointed him toward the right path and told him to get lost, but Ayato asked if she'd give him a tour of the school and the city sometime. Julis wanted nothing to do with it, but after Ayato pointed out she had nothing to lose, she ended up agreeing. The next day when Ayato and Yabuki walked into class, Ayato greeted Julis, and to everyone's shock, she actually answered. Normally she treated people like they were background extras, totally invisible, but Julis claimed everyone was being dramatic. As she sat down, quietly seething, the girl on the other side of Ayato lifted her head, and he nearly fell out of his chair, recognizing his old friend Saya. She'd moved abroad 6 years earlier, but now she was back and had enrolled at the academy because her dad wanted her to be his unpaid influencer for his new weapons line. Of course, she had another reason for enrolling too, but she flat out refused to say what it was when Yabuki asked. Right then, the teacher walked in, and seeing Saya, she immediately asked why she'd skipped class the day before. Saya admitted, with zero shame, that her bed had kidnapped her, which earned her a smack on the head and a detention disguised as a makeup class. After the teacher walked off, Ayato clowned on Saya for her unconditional love of sleeping, and while they traded jabs, Julis sat there looking like a jealous girlfriend. Later that day, while Ayato and Saya were chatting again, Julis cut in to drag Ayato off on a tour of the academy. Saya thought it was super suspicious that the school's ice queen suddenly wanted to play tour guide, so she insisted she'd be the one showing him around. That kicked off an argument between the two of them over who had more claim to the job based on who'd been at the academy longer. Out of nowhere, Claudia latched onto Ayato, insisting she was the most qualified of all, since she'd basically grown up on campus. Hearing that, the girls told her to read the room, and even Ayato reminded her about the concept of personal space. Claudia pretended to be offended, but then explained to Ayato that she needed him to sign some paperwork for his Lux compatibility test the next day. After he signed, she turned to leave, but not before rubbing it in front of Saya and Julis, saying she'd have Ayato all to herself the next day. Julis couldn't believe the sheer nerve of Claudia, and Saya fully agreed. Seeing the two of them finally on the same page, Ayato jumped on the chance to talk them both into giving him the tour. Surprisingly, Saya didn't even know the campus that well, and when Julis called her out on it, she admitted to being the honorary president of the No Sense of Direction Club. As the two started bickering again, Ayato suggested a break and went off to grab drinks. The second he was out of sight, Saya asked Julis why she hadn't just insisted on doing the tour solo. Julis explained that she owed him her life, since he'd saved her during their duel. Hearing that they'd actually dueled, Saya asked how it went, and Julis revealed that Claudia had voided the whole thing. To Julis' surprise, Saya pointed out that even without Claudia stepping in, she would have lost anyway, because Ayato was operating on a whole different level. When she added that she and Julis were about equally matched, Julis tried to challenge her right there, but got cut off by the same arrows from the earlier attack. This time, the culprit was right out in the open, and when he tried to hit her with flame spear attacks, his partner showed up to deflect the strike. In retaliation, Saya blasted both of them with her absurdly oversized Lux grenade launcher, obliterating the fountain and soaking everyone in sight. She then asked Julis if she wanted to keep dueling, but before the princess could answer, Ayato came back and, seeing all the destruction, looked seriously worried. But once he noticed the girls were completely drenched, with their clothes gone see-through, he turned bright red and tried to look away. Julis immediately tried to cover herself once she caught on, but Saya, the shameless influencer, just stood there, proud and exposed, which nearly made Julis lose it completely. The next day, when Ayato met up with Claudia, she reported that no leads had turned up at the crime scene, and that Julis had refused any kind of security detail. Ayato couldn't understand why the princess was so stubborn, but Claudia figured she had to have a good reason. Eventually, the two of them made it to the testing center and ran into Lester, who'd also come in for his compatibility test. He wasn't thrilled to see Ayato, but there wasn't much he could do about it. And when it was time to test, Lester went first. He picked the silver chariot, the Servaresta, but his compatibility only hit 32%, and when he tried to force the weapon to submit, it brutally rejected him. He kept pushing anyway, and once his compatibility dropped into negative territory, he was told to quit while he was ahead. Suddenly, the weapon started acting strange, and Ayato felt like invisible chains were wrapping around him for a few seconds. But the weapon seemed to be testing him, and when Ayato stepped forward, it tried to attack him. Ayato dodged the strikes with ease and finally managed to fully tame the weapon. That shot his compatibility up to 97%, leaving everyone speechless. Hours later, at night, Ayato snuck into the girl's dorm because Claudia had asked to see him, and he completely lost the ability to form words when she showed up wearing nothing but a bathrobe. Claudia acted totally normal about it, though, offering him a seat, which helped him calm down a bit. He asked if having a private room was one of the perks of being student council president, and she said no. Only students with a high rank got private rooms, and if Ayato climbed the rankings, he'd get access to all those benefits too. Then they got down to the real reason he'd been summoned, and Claudia showed Ayato a file on all the candidates for the Phoenix Festa. Coincidentally, almost all of them had dropped out due to injuries in the past few weeks. Claudia suspected they'd been attacked, the same as Julis, but had no way to prove it. Lester and his bulked-up buddy Randy were the top suspects, since neither had an alibi for when Julis and Saya were attacked the day before. That's why Claudia wanted Ayato to become Julis's personal bodyguard, since he was the only person she felt comfortable around. Curious, Ayato asked why Claudia cared so much about Julis's safety, and she claimed she was just doing her duty as council president. She then promised to reward him for his services and caught Ayato completely off guard by putting her hand right on one of his more exposed areas. The poor virgin panicked instantly, but had just enough sense left to bolt before anything else could happen. A few days later, Ayato and Julis met up for their city tour, and Ayato was struck by how good she looked in casual clothes. Julis absolutely hated being stared at, and got so flustered by his compliment that she nearly forgot how to form a sentence. Still, she pulled herself together, and the tour officially began. She showed him the Festa arenas, and Ayato was shocked by how many there were. Julis explained that dueling was basically part of their lifestyle, so the arenas were necessary to keep the whole city from turning into a full-blown war zone. Soon after, the two of them stopped for lunch, and while they ate, Ayato advised Julis not to go out alone since she was a prime target, but she waved off the advice completely. Right then, Lester showed up with his goon squad looking for trouble, but Julis said she wasn't interested. When he tried to push the issue, Ayato stepped in and asked if all those protein shakes had clogged his ears. Lester was furious, but before he could do anything, his friends talked him down, and he left with the group. Julis praised Ayato for the good work, and he just shrugged it off. Later, on the way back to campus, the two of them ran into some students from LRecap Academy, ready to throw down. But it turned out to be a setup, and Julis realized her attackers must have paid those students to distract her. In seconds, she flipped the fight against them, leaving just one conscious so she could interrogate him. The guy admitted he didn't know who'd hired them, but when he tried to describe the person, he suddenly pointed at a hooded figure standing right behind them. Julis chased after the figure, only to realize she'd walked straight into another trap. She managed to dodge the attack, but when Ayato showed up to help, he became the new target. Luckily, he deflected the shot with his borrowed Lux weapon, only tearing his shirt in the process. The attackers fled instantly, but instead of chasing them down, Julis started scolding Ayato for playing hero again. Ayato calmly pointed out that it had actually worked out in their favor, and she couldn't really argue with that. So she asked him to come by her room later. This time, when he climbed in through the window, he gave her a heads up first, and Julis wasn't this time caught mid-cover-up. But she suddenly asked him to take off his shirt, and he panicked, thinking she wanted to explore his secret chamber. Realizing his mind had gone completely into the gutter, she got embarrassed and told him he didn't need to put the hot dog on ice. She explained she just wanted to fix his shirt, and Ayato was surprised a princess even knew how to use a needle and thread. Julis got shy at the comment, saying, honestly, that her skills weren't even that good. She also admitted she'd only offered to fix the shirt because she didn't want to owe him another favor, so Ayato took it off. While she sewed, Ayato sat awkwardly on her bed, checking out the room, until he noticed a photo on the windowsill. Curious, he asked about the people in the picture, and even though she was annoyed he touched it, she told him they were her friends. She'd met them back when she got into trouble with some street kids after sneaking out of the palace. Back then, she didn't know who those girls were, but when she went back to the palace, she found out they lived at an orphanage in a poor neighborhood, and it stuck with her. So she started secretly following them whenever she snuck out, always hiding her real identity. She believed the nuns knew who she was, since the foundation her late mother had created was the one that built the orphanage. But the funding kept getting tighter every year, and it was getting harder to raise money. That's why she decided to enroll at the academy and secure the funding she needed by winning festas. Ayato figured that, as an actual princess, she could just raise the money some other way, but Julis said it wasn't that simple. The royal family was basically just a puppet of the Integrated Enterprise Foundation, which controlled most of the world, so this was really her only option. The more she talked about it, the angrier she seemed, but also more determined, which is why Ayato didn't try to comfort her right then. The moment she finished sewing the shirt, she handed it back and told him to get lost, but Ayato's attention shifted to her handkerchief. Seeing that, Julis explained that the girls had given it to her as a birthday gift years ago, and it had become her most treasured possession. Everything she shared made Ayato see her in a completely different light, so when he got to class the next day, he approached her more naturally. But Julis was so locked in on some letter that she didn't even notice him until he called her name. That put him on edge, especially when she bolted out of school the second the final bell rang. As he stood in the hallway with Yabuki, Claudia showed up carrying the Cervaresta and noticed he seemed off. Yabuki explained it was about a certain problematic blonde, and almost immediately Ayato realized Julis could be in danger. He figured she hadn't told him about the letter because she didn't trust him, but Claudia disagreed. As far as she could tell, Julis was trying to keep him out of danger precisely because she cared about him. That comment reminded Ayato of the promise Haruka had made to always protect him, so he decided it was finally his turn to protect someone. He took off running, but Claudia called out and tossed him the Cervaresta, saying he was going to need it. Meanwhile, Julis had already arrived at the meeting spot and barely survived a collapsing ceiling. She then called out her mystery attacker, and when he revealed himself, she wasn't the least bit surprised to see it was Silas, Lester's other buddy. He complimented her for figuring out it was him, and Julis said it was thanks to a slip-up he'd made trying to calm Lester down in the shopping district the day before. His comment made Silas ask if Ayato had provoked Lester on purpose, and Julis said it was entirely possible. She'd noticed Ayato was way sharper than he let on, and Silas mentioned he should have aimed properly at Ayato back in that forest. That comment set Julis off, but Silas told her to calm down, saying he wouldn't hurt Ayato if she just dropped out of the festa. Julis said she didn't negotiate with terrorists and drew her Lux weapon, ready to attack. But then, out of nowhere, Lester spoke up, asking Silas if he was really behind everything. Apparently, Lester had gotten a letter supposedly from Julis, asking him to come to an abandoned building for a duel. He never expected to find Silas there instead, bragging about his evil deeds, and he got furious when Julis revealed Silas had been attacking students because a rival academy had bought his services. Silas didn't deny any of it, and even admitted he'd lured Lester there so he could take the fall in his place. Enraged, Lester tried to attack Silas but got blocked by one of his puppets. Still, he didn't back down and managed to destroy those puppets. So Silas summoned even more, surrounding both Julis and Lester. Lester fought with everything he had, but his massive muscles weren't enough, and he ended up overwhelmed. As for Julis, she used her flames to defend herself, but the puppets were too much for her alone, and she ended up cornered against the wall. Silas then launched into one of those classic villain monologues, but she told him to stop acting like he deserved that much screen time. She also revealed she'd already figured out he'd sold his dignity to Seidoukan Academy, and Silas looked genuinely stunned. But the fact that she was getting so close to the truth only put her in more danger, because now he needed to eliminate her for good. Right as one of the puppets was about to carry out that cowardly plan, Ayato showed up and pulled off a last-second, movie-worthy rescue. Julis's reaction to seeing him was pure irritation, because he'd just charged headfirst into the exact danger she'd been trying to protect him from. Ayato said he appreciated the thought, but then asked who was going to protect her, since she only ever worried about protecting everyone else. Julis couldn't come up with an answer, so he answered for her, saying he'd be her protector from now on. His words left her completely flustered, and her softer side made another appearance. But Silas interrupted their little moment with one of his bigger puppets, telling Ayato he didn't remember inviting him to his private party. When he mentioned that Ayato wouldn't be able to beat all his puppets, not even with the Cervaresta, Ayato simply said, "Wanna bet?" When Silas unleashed his puppet army, Ayato scooped up Julis with his free arm and unleashed his power. Silas's puppets didn't stand a chance after that, and the guy lost his mind watching what was happening to his creations. Worse yet, Ayato had figured out exactly how he controlled the puppets, so every single attack became completely useless. Once they were all destroyed, Silas totally lost it and revealed his trump card, a puppet modeled after a massive gorilla. Still, it was no match for Ayato, who took it down in minutes. Seeing that, a terrified Silas decided it was time to run, trying to escape on one of his already defeated puppets. Ayato asked Julis to wait while he chased him down, but she said there was no need, and used her powers to fly them both straight to Silas. The guy started begging for mercy the second he saw them, but Ayato didn't listen and sliced the puppet clean in half. Ayato wasn't the least bit worried about dropping someone from the sky, since Silas was a Genestella and wouldn't die from a fall like that. Plus, backup was already waiting to catch him, so there was no reason to worry about him escaping. As the two of them admired the sunset, Ayato suddenly felt a sharp pain and cried out, which instantly worried Julis. But she couldn't see the invisible chains wrapping around him, and when he passed out, she was left holding up his entire body weight. Meanwhile, Ayato was dreaming about the past, about Haruka performing a ritual to bind him with those same invisible chains. She said it was to protect him, but Ayato didn't understand what he needed protecting from, and he blacked out again. In the next moment, he woke up in the present and realized he was lying across Julis's lap. She explained that Claudia was on her way to pick them up and wouldn't let him sit up when he tried. Ayato had no choice but to lie back down, and that's when she asked who had put that binding spell on him. Ayato admitted it was Haruka, and Julis figured it was to stop him from using his powers. He confirmed she was right, explaining he could use his abilities for a maximum of 5 minutes before the spell kicked in and knocked him out. Confused, she asked why Haruka would do something like that, and he said he'd love to know too, but she disappeared 5 years ago. Julis's expression turned to pure pity, but Ayato reassured her that he was fine, and that Haruka must have sealed his powers for a good reason. He then asked if she'd found her ideal Festa partner yet, and offered to fill that spot himself, since she still didn't have one. Julis tried to turn him down, using his limited power as an excuse, but he assured her he'd be fine. He also reminded her that he was her protector now, and she got all flustered again, finally agreeing to team up with him. Meanwhile, Silas was still on the run, but Claudia eventually caught up to him and injured him badly. Right then, Yabuki showed up and asked if she was planning to use the situation to put Alicant in their debt. Claudia ignored the question and said she'd hand Silas over to Yabuki and the Shadow Stars for interrogation. Unbeknownst to them, they were being watched through security cameras belonging to Silas's employers, and one of them commented that they already had enough data thanks to the puppets they'd given Silas. Days later, Claudia attended a meeting with the student council presidents from the other academies. Shortly after the meeting started, Dirk from Le Wolf and Ernest from Geraldworth got into it, with Ernest nearly ripping Dirk's head clean off his shoulders, literally. But Dirk wasn't even fazed, and once Ernest backed off, Dirk brought up a rumor he'd heard. Apparently, Seidoukan and Alicant were supposedly working together to build a new Lux weapon, and he wanted to know if the two schools were secretly plotting something behind everyone's backs. Claudia assured him the collaboration had been arranged through official channels and added that the results would be made public. Dirk stayed suspicious, sensing something was off, and Fan Xinglu brought up the recent mobilization of the Shadow Stars, hinting that something had gone down between Seidoukan and Alicant. Claudia played dumb and smoothly managed to steer everyone back to the day's agenda. Out of nowhere, Shuma, the president of Alicant's council, requested that AI-controlled units be allowed to compete in the next Festa. Meanwhile, back at Seidoukan Academy, Ayato was rushing to find Julis when he accidentally crashed into a girl named Kirin. The two of them started apologizing at the same time, but got rudely interrupted by some guy, total angry dad energy, complaining that Kirin was making him wait. The girl bolted over to him immediately, leaving Ayato wondering who this insufferable father figure even was. Later, while he and Julis trained, she didn't go easy on him at all, but Ayato managed to keep up with her attacks and avoid getting wrecked. When they finally called it quits, they talked strategy, and Julis warned Ayato not to accept any challenges. She didn't want to risk exposing his skills and fighting style to future opponents, and Ayato promised to behave. They were still in the middle of that conversation when Saya walked in with Lester, complaining about how Julis was hogging all of Ayato's time. As far as Saya was concerned, the two of them were basically sneaking off to make out every time they were alone, even though she had zero proof of that. That comment set Julis off, and, predictably, the two girls started arguing. Ignoring them both, Ayato asked Lester how he was doing, since he'd been hospitalized after Silas's attack. Lester calmly said he was fine, but that didn't stop Ayato from pressing further. He asked why Lester had shown up with Saya, and the big guy said he'd picked up the shrimp on the way over. Saya heard that and immediately demanded justice for the vertically challenged, but of course, nobody ever listens to minorities. Lester then thanked Ayato, a little awkwardly, for what he'd done during the whole incident, and Ayato smiled. Right then, Claudia walked in with some engineering students from Alicant, and one of them, Ernesta, seemed super pumped to be there, while Camilla was way more reserved. They were, in fact, the exact same girls who'd hired Silas and watched his defeat to gather the combat data they needed. Nobody in the room knew that, but Julis was too smart for her own good. She realized right away that this collaboration was the price Seidoukan had to pay to keep Saya from suing them over the whole Silas mess. Claudia pretended not to know what Julis was talking about, but the princess wasn't buying it and demanded to know why she'd brought the enemy into their own training room. Ernesta, way too excited, said she just wanted to meet the guy who'd sliced her puppets into confetti, openly admitting her role in the whole thing. Julis and Saya drew their weapons instantly, but Ernesta didn't care and kept staring at Ayato like he was a lab specimen. When she was done, she announced she liked him, whispered in his ear that things wouldn't end well for him next time, and then kissed him on the cheek for good measure. Julis and Saya were practically vibrating with rage and jealousy, while Ayato just stood there completely lost. Ernesta found the whole thing hilarious and ducked behind Camilla, who started apologizing for her friend's behavior, but stopped mid-sentence to take a good look at Saya's weapon. She noted it was pretty unusual, correctly named all its components, and then launched into a list of every single flaw, declaring the weapon was as useless as the person who made it. Saya furiously demanded she take it back, but Camilla refused, because Saya's father was considered a total embarrassment among Alicant's engineers. He'd been kicked out of the group years earlier, and as the head of the engineering faction, she refused to acknowledge anything he'd built. Once things started really heating up, Claudia suggested they leave, and Camilla fully agreed. But Saya kept insisting Camilla take back what she said. That's when Ernesta told her to just drop it, saying Camilla wouldn't budge unless she was forced to, and the only way that would happen was by beating her in a duel, though Ernesta doubted she stood a chance. After they left, Saya announced she was also entering the Phoenix Festa and wanted Ayato as her partner. Julis immediately protested, saying Ayato was already her partner, but the garden gnome was too dense to understand how partnerships worked. She argued that Julis had no right to hog Ayato forever, and as the two of them started dragging him in opposite directions, Lester walked off feeling genuinely sorry for the guy. Meanwhile, outside, Ernesta teased Camilla for provoking Saya like that. Camilla said she was just being honest, then asked Ernesta what she thought of Ayato. She said she wanted to keep watching him a little longer and was glad their president had helped set everything up for the festa. That made Camilla ask if she was planning another scheme, and Ernesta didn't deny it, making it crystal clear she was determined to get exactly what she wanted. The next day, as Ayato and Yabuki walked to class, Yabuki launched into one of his massive info dumps about Alicant and the school's different factions. He explained that the Ferrovius faction was the most influential of all, and it just happened to be Ernesta and Camilla's faction. Right as Ayato was about to ask a follow-up question, the two of them got interrupted by the sound of a slap. The one who got slapped was Kirin, and the furious man from the day before was the one who'd done it, her uncle, Koichiro. When he tried to hit her again for talking back, Ayato stepped in and asked if hitting girls made him feel powerful. The man said Ayato should mind his own business, since he was just disciplining his niece. But Ayato wasn't about to let it slide. Seeing that, Koichiro asked for his name and checked the school rankings to see where he stood. When he realized Ayato wasn't even on the list, he started talking down to him until he found out the Cerveresta belonged to him. He then asked what Ayato wanted in exchange, and Ayato said he wanted him to swear he'd never lay a hand on Kirin again. Koichiro agreed, but on the condition that Ayato beat Kirin herself in a duel. The girl protested immediately, but her uncle didn't care, so she had no choice but to accept. As she started the challenge, she warned Ayato he could still back out, but he refused. When the duel began, Koichiro shouted at Kirin, warning her not to let her sword touch the Cerveresta because the blade would cut hers clean in half. Kirin took the advice, and as she fought Ayato, she admitted he really knew how to handle a sword. As the fight heated up, Julis arrived and nearly lost her mind seeing Ayato doing the exact thing she'd told him not to do. She immediately asked Yabuki how long the fight had been going, and he said about 4 minutes. Her worry doubled instantly because Ayato was almost out of gas. He knew it too, so he decided to speed things up. But in the end, he lost to Kirin, who didn't look the least bit happy about winning. She apologized to Ayato and ran off, and when he tried to follow her, Julis stopped him. She pointed out that he was on the verge of collapsing and asked why he thought it was a good idea to duel the #1 ranked student, leaving him speechless. A few minutes later, when Koichiro and Kirin reached somewhere more private, the man complained that she'd taken way too long to finish the duel. She tried to apologize, but the rude man cut her off, reminding her that her competitive spirit was the only good thing about her. He also warned her never to forget that it was thanks to him that she was at the top, slowly working her way toward her dreams. Kirin could only respond with "yes, sir," keeping her head down like someone whose spirit had been broken a long time ago. Meanwhile, Julis, who'd sworn off ever being anyone's peacekeeper, stormed into the common area where Ayato was resting and chucked a towel at his face, annoyed. Ayato explained he'd had no choice but to accept the duel, but surprisingly, Julis wasn't even mad about that anymore. She was furious because Koichiro treated Kirin like a tool and said she would have taught him a lesson herself if she'd run into that kind of fairy tale evil stepmother type. She also admitted she was a little disappointed Ayato had lost the duel because it would have given her hope that she could reach the top herself someday. Before Ayato showed up, Kirin and Claudia were the only two she'd never managed to beat, since they held first and second place respectively. Ayato was shocked to learn Claudia ranked that high, and Julis told him not to let the girl's looks fool him. Claudia used the Pandora Orga Lux, which let her see up to 10 seconds into the future. That's why she'd never lost a single fight. But in Kirin's case, the girl didn't use any Orga Lux at all, and wasn't even a Strega like Julis, capable of controlling an element. She'd only been at the school for 3 months, and had claimed first place using nothing but her Japanese sword. Her raw talent was exactly what Claudia didn't want to underestimate, so she told Ayato they'd need to rethink their strategy if they wanted to go far in the festa. She also asked him to get a new badge, since Kirin had destroyed his old one to win the duel. So the next day, he went to find Claudia. The council president was at the pool, and seeing her in a swimsuit made the guy feel a little too warm on the inside. After handing over his new badge, she mentioned she'd been surprised to hear he dueled Kirin. She already knew Koichiro was behind everything though, and said the man had always been trouble. He used his position as the Academy's talent scout to get Kirin enrolled, and had been exploiting her ever since because he wanted a seat on the school's executive board. Ayato felt bad for Kirin, but Claudia said it wasn't worth worrying about, because she believed the girl had her own reasons for going along with Koichiro's plans. Unfortunately for the man though, his efforts were completely pointless since he'd never, and she meant never, meet the requirements for the promotion he wanted. Curious, Ayato asked how she knew that, and Claudia revealed that her mom was one of the executives. Later, when Ayato got back to his dorm, he was surprised to find Kirin waiting for him, so he brought her to the lounge. There, she thanked him for standing up for her, and Ayato said he'd just done the right thing. He got up to open the door, only to find Yabuki and a bunch of other guys had been eavesdropping on the entire conversation from outside. So he decided to walk Kirin back to her dorm, but the girl was nervous the whole way, since he was the first guy, not related to her, that she'd ever walked with alone. When she mentioned her dad was really strict, Ayato commented that the strictness showed in his sword style, which surprised her. She hadn't expected him to know who her father was. But Ayato, in his own way, was also a swordsman, and her dad was practically a legend among swordmasters. Kirin's excitement grew hearing that, and she pointed out he'd used a specific sword style during their duel. Realizing she was, essentially, fangirling out, she apologized, but Ayato just laughed because he totally got that feeling. That put her at ease enough to admit she believed she was nothing without her sword. Ayato completely disagreed, but the girl had heard so much trash talk from Koichiro that she genuinely believed she was just another talentless nobody. Suddenly, he remembered something she'd said during the duel, so he asked what she'd been fighting for, and Kirin answered that it was to save her father. Ayato still felt like that wasn't reason enough for her to become Koichiro's golden ticket to the top. Kirin defended him, saying he was literally her savior, even though the man hated Genestella with every fiber of his being. The conversation then shifted to training, and Kirin revealed that Koichiro had banned her from training with anyone else, especially anyone from page 1. Ayato then said she could train with him in the mornings since he wasn't even ranked yet, and Kirin panicked. The idea of being alone with an unrelated guy felt like a full-blown scandal, but she couldn't pass up the opportunity, so she agreed. Shortly after they said goodbye, Saya, the self-taught ninja, suddenly dropped out of a tree and put Ayato in a chokehold. She asked which girl he'd been talking to, but Ayato couldn't answer, since she was literally cutting off his air supply. Realizing that, she let go and apologized for getting carried away, so he asked why she'd been hiding in a tree of all places. Saya explained she'd been looking for him to see if he'd changed his mind about being her festa partner. Ayato apologized and said he was still with Julis, so Saya finally gave up. Still, she wasn't about to let go of finding out who he'd been talking to before, so he revealed it was Kirin. That made the girl say he was always surrounded by girls with huge assets, and that's why he didn't care about her anymore. Ayato said that was a total lie, and pointed out that she and Kirin actually had something in common, since both of them were at the academy trying to help out their dads. A few days later, while Ayato and Kirin were training, Ernesta and Camilla watched everything through the monitor. From their conversation, it was clear they knew something was about to happen, but chose not to intervene, for purely selfish reasons. Right then, the fog around Ayato and Kirin thickened, and when the two of them reached a stretch of the path, they saw signs marking it as closed. The very next moment, they got surrounded by monsters that regenerated after every hit. Kirin quickly figured out that destroying their cores would solve the problem, but after the others watched one of their classmates go down, everyone scattered and fled. Ayato then grabbed one of the destroyed cores and realized it was synthetic, which convinced him Alicant was behind the attack. Right then, the monsters came back and started launching fireballs at the two of them. That cracked the road open, and Ayato fell through, dragging Kieran down with him when she tried to help. Ernesta looked disappointed at how things turned out and asked Camilla if that was really the best the rival faction could do. Camilla said the monsters weren't the only thing they had planned, and Ernesta's excitement came roaring back. Meanwhile, Ayato and Kieran were trapped in an underground water reservoir, and he apologized for dragging her into the whole mess. Kieran clung to him to stay afloat, so when he made a comment about how big the space was, she thought he was talking about something else entirely, something a bit more, let's say, generously proportioned. Ayato tried to explain she totally misread the situation, but got cut off when a sea dragon suddenly appeared out of nowhere and tried to attack them. Ayato held on to Kieran while fighting the monster, but she begged him to just leave her behind because she couldn't stand the thought of anyone else sacrificing themselves for someone like her. It seemed like something had happened to her when she was younger, but she wasn't ready to talk about it yet, so Ayato just comforted her, telling her he'd handle the situation and that she shouldn't talk down on herself like that. Once she calmed down, he sliced off one of the stone beams and asked her to stay put, right as the dragon surfaced again. Ayato then asked Kieran if she could sense the monster's core, and she said the core seemed to be moving. Because of that, Ayato decided to go all in, since the Serveresta could handle his full output. Kieran was blown away watching him unleash his power, and even more so when he took down the monster in a single hit. Unfortunately, he paid the price for it. Haruka's binding chains kicked in and squeezed him until he passed out. Later, while they waited for their clothes to dry, Ayato explained the whole situation to Kieran, and she asked why he was even willing to push himself that hard for a fight. Ayato said it was because he had someone to protect, and she assumed he meant Julis. She also assumed he had romantic feelings for the princess, but Ayato denied it like his life depended on it. He then asked what she needed to save her father from, and she revealed he was locked up for killing a man who'd held her hostage at a cafe years earlier. The whole thing was clearly self-defense, but since her father was a Genestella, he got charged with murder. Koichiro had promised to get her father out of prison in exchange for her obedience, and she'd agreed without a second thought. Ayato refused to believe Koichiro was really her only option for saving her dad, and promised Kieran that no matter what she decided, she'd never be alone. His words warmed her up inside, and she mentioned that her father used to pat her head all the time too. Right then, a searchlight lit them up, and rescue teams started working to pull them out. Later that day, Kieran met up with Koichiro, who said he'd been worried about her. In reality, though, he was more worried about losing his ace in the hole than about her actual well-being. He also told her she shouldn't associate with Ayato anymore, so she wouldn't end up dragged into more trouble with Alicant, but she refused. It was the first time she'd ever pushed back against him since they'd made their deal, but she didn't care anymore. Furious, Koichiro hit her and said she was nothing without him, but Kieran pointed out it was actually the exact opposite. When he tried to hit her again, she stopped him and said their alliance was over. As she started to walk away, the man, desperate, tried to guilt-trip her into coming back, but Kieran was genuinely done. She then went to find Ayato and asked him to duel her, saying it would be her way of marking her freedom, and he agreed. Julis watched from the observation booth alongside Claudia, Saya, Lester, and Yabuki, complaining about how Claudia was turning this duel into such a huge production. Claudia told her to quit whining, and Saya said Ayato wouldn't lose to Kieran twice. That made Lester ask if Ayato had some kind of plan, since he'd borrowed a basic Lux weapon from him. Hearing that, Yabuki said he'd also lent Ayato a Lux weapon, which got everyone curious. Right then, the duel started, and unlike the first time, Ayato showed complete mastery with a sword. He also busted out spear and short sword techniques, and right when Kieran thought she had the win locked in, he switched tactics to a grappling style. The surprise move left Kieran completely thrown off, and in the end, Ayato was declared the winner. Later, while Julis and Saya congratulated Ayato in the locker room, Claudia showed up with Kieran in tow. The younger girl shyly asked if she could train with Ayato and Julis, and Saya said sure she could. Julis reacted instantly, saying the runt wasn't even officially on the team, but Saya didn't care, since Kieran was already crashing their sessions every day anyway. Ayato then told Kieran she was welcome to join them, as long as she didn't mind all the pointless bickering, and she was overjoyed. Right then, Koichiro started banging on the door, demanding Kieran come out and face him. With her permission, Ayato let Koichiro in, and he wasted no time chewing her out for losing the duel. When he tried to yank her by the arm, she shoved his hand away and said she didn't take orders from him anymore. That made him completely lose it, and he tried to punch her, but Ayato caught his fist mid-air and told him to get lost. Faced with that, Koichiro started playing the victim, since he wasn't a Genestella himself, and even threatened Kieran, saying he'd make sure her father rotted in prison if she didn't come back. Before he could say anything else, Claudia cut him off and threatened to get her mom on the phone. Koichiro didn't say another word after that, and as he turned to leave, Kirin thanked him for bringing her into the Asterisk system and enrolling her at Seidoukan in the first place. Obviously, he didn't respond, but it didn't matter, because she was finally free, and after wiping away her tears, Kirin thanked Ayato. While they talked, Saya watched them with zero expression, not saying a word. Meanwhile, back at Alicant, some students got wrecked in a training match against Ernesta's new puppets, and she told Camilla that basically guaranteed their win at the festa. She also pulled up stolen footage of Ayato's fight against the dragon, saying she finally had all the data she needed. Camilla praised her for working the situation to their advantage, and Ernesta swelled with pride, bowing like she was performing for an invisible audience. That night, Saya approached Kirin and asked if they could be festa partners, since they had the same goals. Kirin agreed, and the very next day, they started training together. But even though they were both talented, they were nowhere near Ayato and Julis' level, which left Saya frustrated. Later that same day, Ayato got approached in the cafeteria by a student asking for an autograph, and he happily gave it. After she walked off, an annoyed Julis asked if he thought he was some kind of celebrity now, and Saya said he was an idiot for handing out autographs like that. Yabuki quickly jumped in to defend his buddy, pointing out that it wasn't every day an unranked student rocketed to first place. He also pointed out that Julis had had her own moment of fame back when she made page 1, but that it didn't last, because she'd frozen out everyone around her. Julis argued that had been the best decision she'd ever made, then showed Ayato an online auction currently running for the autograph he'd just signed. Seeing his shock, Yabuki explained that students did this sometimes for extra cash, and Saya told him not to worry about it, because his real fans were rooting for him regardless. Kirin said she was one of those fans, which made Julis ask if she'd still be rooting for him once they faced off directly at the festa. Sei said they'd give it their all, because they knew exactly what they were fighting for. Not holding back, Julis pointed out that Saya and Kirin might not do so well, since their team had only just formed. So Saya reminded her that she and Ayato were also a fairly new pair. Ayato jumped in fast to steer the conversation away from an argument, saying Saya and Kirin just needed to work on their teamwork. Saya took that advice seriously and announced that she and Kirin would work on their bond the very next day. She said it with total confidence, but when the two of them met up the next day, they both sank into a pit of awkward embarrassment. Neither of them had ever actually started a friendship before, so after a lot of thinking, Saya suggested they just do whatever Kirin wanted. Kirin couldn't think of anything, so in the end, they settled on going shopping for a birthday gift for Saya's dad. Kirin suggested a few things she thought were interesting, but Saya didn't think any of them were quite right, so they had to stop and rethink. Kirin asked Saya to tell her about her dad, hoping it would help narrow things down. Saya said her dad was basically a mad scientist type, the kind who'd built her a new weapon every birthday since she was old enough to pull a trigger. Suddenly, an idea hit her, so she pulled out a map and asked Kirin to help her find the place. The trip wasn't long, but Kirin got nervous when she noticed the shop was in a pretty sketchy part of town. Saya assured her everything would be fine, and walked straight in to check the place out. It turned out to be a store selling used luxe weapons. They also sold some sketchy, borderline illegal stuff, but Saya wasn't interested in that and just browsed the weapons on display. Soon, she spotted one that made her eyes light up like fireworks, and after confirming the original generator was still intact inside, she said she'd take it. Kirin was relieved they didn't have to stick around that place any longer, but as they walked off, she asked why Saya had picked that particular weapon. Saya explained her dad could repurpose the generator for his own work, and Kirin felt relieved knowing they'd found the perfect gift. Saya then said she wanted to return the favor, so Kirin asked if she could teach her to swim. Saya wasn't exactly a mermaid, but she was a pretty decent swimmer. Later, at the pool, she asked why Kirin hadn't just asked Ayato to be her swim coach. Kirin panicked instantly, and after nearly drowning, admitted she wanted to learn in secret, hoping he'd be proud of her once he found out she could swim. Saya told her that was brave, then went off to grab drinks for both of them, telling Kirin to keep practicing. The girl obeyed, but ended up accidentally crashing into a girl named Violet, who was chilling on a pool float with her headphones in. Coming back up for air, Kirin apologized for the mistake, but Violet didn't accept it and challenged her to a duel. But once she realized who Kirin actually was, she calmed down and admitted she might have overreacted a bit. She then asked why Kirin hadn't stopped when she saw her coming, and Kirin admitted she was still learning to swim, which made the girl laugh. Right as she started talking down to her, she suddenly got smacked in the head with a pool float, one that Saya had thrown, and got furious. She demanded to know who Saya was, and once she found out she wasn't even ranked, decided to challenge her to a duel just to show off. Violet was ranked 35th at her academy, but Saya didn't care one bit and beat her easily with a single shot from her massive Lux lightning gun. Later, while Saya and Kirin sipped their drinks, Saya told Kirin she needed to grow a backbone, basically. She'd noticed how timid Kieran got whenever Violet talked down to her, and Kieran admitted years of listening to her uncle had wrecked her confidence. Saya assured her Koichiro was dead wrong about her and insisted she needed to have way more pride in herself. Kieran promised to try, then asked why Saya had picked her as a partner in the first place. Saya said it was because she used the same sword style as Ayato, which made her trustworthy. That seemingly small moment turned out to be exactly what the girls needed, and at the next training session, Ayato and Julis noticed the two of them were way more in sync. Ayato then told Julis they needed to step up their own game if they wanted to win too. That night, Yabuki met up with Claudia in her office, and they went over the Phoenix Festa bracket. There were 256 total pairs, so Ayato and Julis' team wasn't in the same bracket as Saya and Kieran's. The only way they'd face off would be in the finals, if both teams made it that far. But Claudia said things wouldn't be easy because of Alicant's puppets and Irene, the unhinged fighter LeWolf, had entered. She was sitting calmly in one of LeWolf's disciplinary rooms when Dirk came to visit, along with his assistant Corona, to inform her she'd be competing in the Phoenix Festa. His only reason for entering her was so she'd take out Ayato, since he was worried the Serveresta would become a problem down the line. Irene found it hilarious that Dirk was actually scared of something for once, but suddenly turned serious and asked if he'd kept his promise to protect her sister. Dirk assured her he had, that he'd kept his word, so Irene said she'd take the job, and was released right after. A few days later, the Phoenix Festa opening ceremony took place, and the Festa's president gave his speech. Ayato and Julis barely paid attention to what he was saying, until Ayato noticed the guy smirking suspiciously, staring right at him. It was only for a second, but then he announced the rules had been changed to allow puppets in matches. He swore the change wasn't made to benefit any particular group, but Ayato and his friends knew he was lying through his teeth. As for the crowd, they only cared about the thrill of watching the festa, so they cheered hard when he wrapped up his speech. Later, as students headed toward their respective arenas, Ayato spotted Lester and Randy and ran over to invite them to lunch. Lester turned him down, saying he had no interest in being his little buddy, and before walking off, warned Ayato not to lose before their matchup. Right then, Saya suddenly hugged Ayato out of nowhere, while Kieran held up the bento box she'd made with her help. Julis was surprised Saya could actually cook, and the runt said there was a lot about her nobody knew. After checking out the contents of the box, Ayato patted Kieran's head, praising her work, and Saya insisted he do the same for her. That left Julis green with jealousy, so she suggested they all head to the waiting room to eat. After the meal, everyone tuned in for the first match of the day, and while the commentators chattered non-stop, Kieran asked about Ayato and Julis' first opponents. They were from Gerardwood Academy and ranked 40th and 31st, but Ayato promised not to underestimate them. Soon after, he and Julis got called for their match, and when it was announced that he'd dethroned Seidoukan's #1 and taken her spot, the crowd went wild. That made him a little nervous, but he relaxed once Julis took the lead and he just followed her rhythm. When the buzzer sounded, Julis stepped back, letting Ayato put on a show by unlocking his ability and unleashing his power. He then charged the opponents at lightning speed and smashed their badges before they even knew what hit them. The whole arena went dead silent for a few seconds before erupting into cheers over the insane new record. On the way back to the post-match interview, Julis praised Ayato for sticking to the plan, but warned him not to say anything that might give away their actual strategy. After the interview, Julis sat in the waiting room complaining about how the media was full of ruthless sharks. When she compared the reporters to the Seidoukan school newspaper, Yabuki thanked her, but she made it clear that wasn't a compliment. He then revealed he'd tried to get exclusive info on Alicant's puppets, but got kicked out, so he needed their help getting in to watch the match live. Everyone in the arena had mixed feelings about seeing Alicant's puppets in action, but those feelings quickly turned to shock when it came out that Ernesta had released all the technical specs on her creations. Camilla wasn't happy about that decision at all, but Ernesta said it was the only way to shut down the cheating accusations going around. She was also confident it wouldn't cost them the win, and Camilla said it better not. In the arena, LeWolf's team felt insulted by Alicant, since they were basically being used as guinea pigs, and that feeling only grew when the male puppet, Artie, said he'd give them a 1-minute head start. Suddenly, Artie's partner, Rimsey, shot him in the head and called him an idiot for daring to act honorably since he wasn't even human. Still, she didn't take back the offer and told the opponents to use their time wisely. One of the guys laughed it off, then rushed to attack the puppets with his signature spiral move, but Artie's 360-degree barrier made that completely impossible. The guy shouted at his partner, who was fighting Rimsey, to switch tactics, but was shocked to see his shots getting deflected with zero effort. With no other option, he decided to go all out, but it still wasn't enough to bring Artie down, and he ended up completely drained. Then, once the 60 seconds were up, Artie and Rimsey won without either opponent putting up any real resistance. While everyone applauded the puppets, Ayato and his friends, especially Saya, just sat there in total shock. Later, Saya rewatched the clip of Alicant's match and said Artie's barrier was going to be a serious problem. Julis agreed, saying it would take a massive amount of force to break through it. Right then, Saya's dad called, super hyped, gushing about how epic the match had been. He was in full nerd mode until he heard Ayato's voice and started talking directly to him. Suddenly, he remembered the actual reason for the call and told Saya he'd shipped her a new weapon, but warned she needed to pick it up from customs herself, since it hadn't arrived yet. He was worried she wouldn't make it back in time for her match, but Saya assured him she'd have plenty of time, so he told her not to dare lose. After the call, Saya headed out with Kirin, and Yabuki also slipped away to try to sneak into Artie and Rimsey's post-match interview. As for Ayato and Julis, they decided to use their free time to train. Meanwhile, the puppets met up with Ernesta and got showered with praise, but Rimsey suddenly knocked Artie down, feeling like he disrespected their creator. She only let him get up once Ernesta gave the okay, which made him question why the female puppet seemed to have authority over him. Ernesta explained she'd programmed her to be superior to him, because women should be the ones in charge. She then started leading them to the waiting room, feeling proud that she hadn't let it slip that Rimsey was actually Artie's power limiter. Later that day, Ayato and Julis tried to blow past the speed limit to make it to the match in time, but they both knew they wouldn't make it. So Ayato said he'd call ahead to let the organizers know they'd be running late. Suddenly, they heard a commotion, and when they went to check it out, they found Irene in the middle of a street brawl. After taking down her opponents, the onlookers who'd gathered started cheering, but she snapped back in a bad mood, saying she wasn't there to entertain anyone. Suddenly, she noticed Ayato and walked over to him, but Julis stepped between them, demanding to know what she wanted with him. Irene said it was none of her business, but Julis insisted it was. She then pointed out that the fight Irene had gotten into could cause her problems, but the barbarian completely disagreed. She claimed self-defense, and when Julis refused to back down, she got intrigued by the princess and challenged her to a duel. She didn't even wait for Julis's answer before activating her Lux weapon and attacking, but Julis and Ayato dodged out of the way in time. Irene grinned at that, complimenting the pair's quick reflexes, but the very next moment, her sister Priscilla showed up and started scolding Irene for disturbing the peace. Irene panicked instantly, but couldn't come up with any kind of explanation. Priscilla apologized on her behalf and also made Irene formally apologize before dragging her off. Once the two of them were out of earshot, Julis pulled up the file she had on Priscilla, but the only info available was that she was Irene's Festa partner. Ayato didn't think much of that, since he was way more interested in why Julis had provoked Irene like that. Julis explained she just wanted to confirm her suspicion that Irene had another reason, beyond simple curiosity, for approaching him. While she tried to figure out what that reason was, they got a call letting them know Saya and Kirin's match was about to start. At the arena, one of the commentators mixed up Saya for Kirin since she came across so plain and down to earth, and the girl was offended. But really, she was pouting because Ayato hadn't shown up yet. Kirin assured her he'd be there soon, and said they needed to focus all their attention on their opponents, who were highly skilled in martial arts. Saya couldn't care less and asked Kirin to pick which guy she wanted to duel, but Kirin said it didn't matter to her either way. When the buzzer sounded, both sides charged at each other, and within seconds, Saya beat her opponent, even though he thought he had the upper hand. As for Kirin, she traded blows with her opponent a while longer, using her oversized weapon like an improvised sword. She managed to push the guy back, and when the opening came, she charged her weapon and took him down with one shot, securing the win for the team. Later, while showering off after the win, Saya explained the specs of her new weapon to Kirin, but the girl asked how she managed to fight like a swordswoman even while using a firearm. Saya revealed she was just good at copying what she saw, and that Ayato had also taught her a few things. Once she finished showering, she walked off without grabbing a towel, and while Kirin went to get one for her, Saya tried to figure out how Kirin's, assets managed to attract so many guys to their side of the yard. The younger girl defended herself pretty well, and was relieved when they got a video call notification saying Julis and Ayato were at the door. She asked them to wait while they got dressed, but Saya opened the door anyway and proudly flaunted her fully naked body when the pair walked in. Poor Kirin was so shocked she dropped her towel and screamed in embarrassment. 5 days later, the second round of the festa kicked off with Ayato and Julis' match against a pair of second-tier magical girls. This time, it was Julis who fought using her flames to full effect. Thanks to that, the two girls dropped like dominoes within minutes, securing Ayato and Julis their second win. The next match was between Lester's team and Irene's team, and their strategy was to drag the fight out as long as possible. Apparently, Irene's Lux weapon drained the prana and energy of whoever it hit, and they were hoping to use that against her. Unfortunately, Irene saw right through their plan and attacked Randy first, using her weapon's gravity ability. When Lester tried to step in, she took him down without even breaking a sweat, then turned her full focus back on Randy. After he passed out from the pressure, Lester tried to avenge him and actually managed to knock Irene down. Unfortunately, that turned out to be his biggest mistake, because the girl took it personally and decided to show him exactly who was boss. But she needed to recharge first, and to everyone's shock, she started drinking Priscilla's blood like something straight out of a vampire movie. That was the price she paid for using her lux, and the silver lining was that Priscilla had regenerative abilities, so she didn't get seriously hurt. Irene also healed up in the process and as a bonus got a strength boost, so when she went after Lester again, he felt the absurd weight of that power and was forced to tap out just to save himself. Later, Claudia congratulated Ayato on making it to the finals, and he thanked her. But he said winning wouldn't be easy, since every finalist was seriously formidable. Claudia assured him he'd be fine, then rested her head on his shoulder and said she was happy to finally get some alone time with him. The completely lost boy had no idea how to react, and right as she started leaning in, he got saved by a call from Kieran. She said she'd lost track of Saya, and when she called the girl, Saya said she didn't even know where she was. Ayato told Kieran not to worry, since he'd go find Saya himself, but Claudia wasn't happy about that, and made sure he knew it. He apologized, said he had to go, and ran off to find the missing gremlin. During the search, he ran into Priscilla, who was being chased by some thugs, and ended up helping her out. While they hid, Priscilla explained the thugs were from a nearby casino where Irene had caused some trouble. When she mentioned Irene was on her way to pick her up, Ayato realized he was walking into a massive mess, and he was right. The second Irene showed up, she looked ready to tear him apart and started cursing him out. Luckily, Priscilla defended him and explained to her hot-headed sister that Ayato had actually just saved her from the guys chasing her. It took a lot of convincing to get Irene to calm down, but she managed it, and Ayato thanked the plot gods for sparing his life. The only issue was that Irene believed Ayato had just coincidentally crossed paths with Priscilla in that alley. Right then, Karen called to say she'd found Saya, and after hanging up, Ayato explained how he'd ended up in that alley in the first place. Irene thanked him for saving Priscilla and swore she'd repay his kindness before their match, since she hated owing anyone anything. The fact that they were about to face off came as a surprise to Ayato, but not to Irene. That night, Irene barged into Dirk's office and demanded to know what he'd been doing while her sister was getting chased down. The guy calmly said a few bruises wouldn't hurt Priscilla, since she had regenerative abilities, but that only made Irene angrier. She tried to attack him, but an invisible force blocked her strike, forcing her to stay on guard. Dirk was protected by an elite group known as the Cats, so she demanded to know why the Cats, who were supposed to be protecting Priscilla, hadn't done their job. Dirk claimed it was because Ayato had intervened, reminding her that the Cats were trained to operate in the shadows. Irene accepted the explanation, and after she left, Dirk asked Corona to run a reading on the match outcome. Corona did as asked and said the girl would win, which satisfied him. He then asked her to call the vice president. After that, he made a call to someone referred to as the Seventh Golden Eye. Meanwhile, Ayato and Julis were in the training room, and he told her Irene had invited him to dinner, as a way of saying thanks for saving Priscilla. Julis was irritated that he'd accepted the invite, and reminded him the sisters were their finals opponents. As far as she was concerned, the invitation could easily be a cover to hurt him, so she insisted on tagging along. When they got to the apartment, Priscilla greeted them and asked them to make themselves comfortable while she finished cooking. Irene was way less welcoming, and once the two of them sat down across from her, she pointed out that she hadn't invited Julis. The princess said she'd invited herself, just to keep an eye on Ayato in case Irene tried anything. Irene asked if she thought she was his mom or something, kicking off a passive-aggressive back and forth between the two of them. But it didn't last long, because Priscilla brought out the food. Irene tried to serve herself right away, but her sister wouldn't let her since she was being rude. Once Ayato and Julis started eating, Irene did too, and seemed genuinely happy about it. But eating also loosened her up a little too much, and she let it slip that she was gambling because she was in debt. Curious, Julis asked why she wasn't just planning to use the Phoenix Fest to prize money, and Priscilla immediately excused herself from the conversation. Irene then explained to her guests that her creditor was Dirk, and that, as part of their deal, she wasn't allowed to compete in festas or pay him back with any prize money she won. The first part of that statement made zero sense to Ayato and Julis, since Irene was, at that very moment, competing in the Phoenix Festa. Irene then admitted it was actually Dirk who'd entered her in the tournament, because he wanted her to get rid of Ayato and his Ser Veresta. She said she was only spilling the truth because she owed Ayato for saving Priscilla, and explained that based on Dirk's reaction to the Ser Veresta, she was sure he'd already witnessed the weapon's power firsthand. Ayato froze hearing that, since it seemed to confirm Haruka had once been the Ser Veresta's previous wielder. Right then, Priscilla came back with dessert, and the mood instantly lightened up, at least for Irene. A little later, Priscilla walked Ayato and Julis to the door, apologizing for all the chaos her sister had caused. Julis, curious, asked why she let Irene treat her like a blood bank, and she said it was because she wanted to be useful to her. But she admitted she was scared of the person Irene became whenever she used that weapon. Hearing that made Ayato even more curious about Irene's Orga Lux, so once he got back to school, he went looking for Claudia to ask about it. But she was completely knocked out asleep, and when he tried to wake her up, she attacked him, forcing him to dodge her strikes and avoid getting stabbed. Luckily, she woke up a few seconds later and quickly apologized for what her sleeping self had tried to do. Ayato took the blame, saying it was his fault for showing up unannounced and trying to wake her up like that. He then asked if it was normal for her to turn into a sleeping assassin every time she rested, and Claudia said she'd only explain if he joined her team for the Griffin Festa. Ayato had no real reason to say no, so Claudia revealed that turning into a horror movie killer in her sleep was an involuntary reflex. The truth was, she relived her own death in her dreams every single night. It was the price of using her Orga Lux, and she'd already relived her own death at least 200 times since becoming compatible with the weapon. That revelation worried Ayato, but Claudia swore she was fine, since she was more than used to it by now. Choosing to trust her, Ayato finally asked about Irene's weapon, and Claudia explained it was capable of manipulating the mind of whoever used it. That explained why Irene always acted like a total psychopath while holding it, and that was definitely not a good thing. In fact, at that exact moment, Irene was somewhere else, staring up at the moon after shaking off the thugs who'd chased Priscilla earlier that day. Her distant gaze meant she was reliving something that had happened years before. There had been a war, and Priscilla had gotten crushed under falling debris, but when Irene rushed to the treatment center, she found her sister alive and completely fine. Her regenerative ability had kicked in and healed her, and the government got extremely interested in that power. They offered the parents money in exchange for Priscilla, but Irene grabbed her sister and ran. It was during that time that they met Dirk, and the first thing he did was hand her the Orga Lux. After the weapon accepted her, Dirk asked Irene to name anything she wanted in return, and that's how their deal was struck. And that's it for today. If you're into anime recaps like this one, drop a comment below. I read every single one. Also check out this other video, you're gonna love it. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.